about that entourage effect. Good morning.
Hey there, Frenchy. How are you?
It's so nice meeting you. So for everybody, Michael and I met on not the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mary at a cannabis event. I was a speaker and Michael was a moderator. And I had never seen a moderator like you, I have to say. Since then, I followed you a little bit. Your life is pretty incredible and unusual. And I don't want to even get on the musical side of your life because it's going to be the hour. I'd like to focus totally on your book, actually.
Great.
On the Cannabis Pharmacy, because I've been trying to explain that most of the information that we have on CBD and THC, there is a lot of misinformation and omission, so that the whole picture is not really presented, because CBD is a good boy and THC is a bad boy. Hemp is used to produce flower, and there is much more to those two compounds separated. There is that whole entourage effect that come into play, and that is still not really, scientifically proven.
Yeah, I mean, the big problem is there, we're drowned in information these days, and a lot of it is good and a lot of it is bad. And in the case of cannabis, it's a moving target. And so our understanding of THC and CBD and the other cannabinoids and the other terpenoids, it's constantly evolving. And, when I look at my book, I love my book, but all I see is the stuff I want to update. So I've got a new edition coming out next year, and I can't wait to get to it because, for example, our understanding of CBD has expanded dramatically since I wrote the book in the latest edition in the middle of 2017, and I can't wait to correct it. Our understanding of terpenes has changed dramatically because not only has there been a little bit more research, but I've done a lot of work with terpenes in the interim, and my understanding of them has increased dramatically. And frankly, there's just a lot of nonsense out there about terpenes. And then when you talk about things like cannabis resin, I mean, something that you're a leading expert in, there's a lot we still have to understand about resin. I mean, what's really fascinating is when you work with the plant and when you work with taking resin from the plant, we notice all these behaviors in the resin. And now, my big thing these days is temperature control. It's so important to control temperature around resin because it's delicate. And a lot of these cannabis compounds, cannabis itself is delicate. We don't treat cannabis like produce, and we should. It's more like a fresh vegetable than it is a bottle of wine. And when we start to understand that, we're going to take better care of our cannabis.
So let's talk about your product, because what I do, I picked up a fruit, I crush it, there is a chemical reaction happening, and I age it. So it's a product that goes through a transformation process. Your latest product that you put on the market, you really capture everything that is at harvest time and hold it in your product until consumption.
Yeah. So I started a new company with two partners at the end of 2018. And we've been researching and developing products since. And the point is, I think the plant is perfect right before we harvest it. So to me, the ideal of cannabis is the composition of the product before a human hand actually kills it,
Uh,
basically. And so,
Transform it. Let's be
right,
nice.
yeah. And so what we try to do with my company, Perfect, is develop a line of products that deliver the kind of cannabinoid and, most importantly, terpenoid entourage associated with the living plant. And it's really, really challenging. And there's no magic bullet. There's just an enormous amount of hard work involved in every single step of the process to make sure that we're losing as little as possible. And I'm using all kinds of tricks to reconstitute the entourage, primarily by taking super high quality sauce slash HTE, high terpene extract, and I developed a method to infuse that high terpene extract back into the plant to just raise the cannabis back to the level it had pre-harvest. And what's great about it is, and I never knew this before I did it, was that when you inhale this product, the entourage is so rich that it actually modulates a lot of the effects of THC. And a lot of people who normally stay away from high THC products because they get anxious or paranoid, et cetera, they can use my product with no problem because the terpene entourage is modulating the effects of the THC at several receptor systems throughout the body. The cannabinoid receptors, but also the trip receptors, the thermoreceptors. So yeah, super excited. I mean, I love cannabis. And to me, the reason I always loved your resin was that it delivers a high quality cannabis experience. And a lot of products in the marketplace, frankly, don't.
Yeah, but it's because there is no place for the quality, and this year everything is make it another level. If you really want to give the same quality, you really need to cut down your price and all your expenses all the way to
But
be able
what's going
to.
to happen? I agree with you, but I think that the problem with that approach is that everybody's tight on money right now, and I deeply understand that. But at the same time, you shouldn't really have to sacrifice the quality of your effect. I would rather drink less great wine than more crap wine, and I feel the same way about cannabis. In other words, I'd rather control my consumption to make sure I can use the stuff that is of the quality that's out there. And there is some great quality stuff out there. You just have to look hard for it.
No, but I mean on our side, I always wanted to bring my price down anyway because I think it's I couldn't afford my hash, so it bothered me. You know what I mean? It's amazing for me to be able to create quantity of something that I consider like my stash, but I'd like to see different prices, and this bring me to a level where I need to analyze everything back to square one to be able to bring quality competitively in a market. And if I can do it, then I can stay there.
Right.
It's all
Sure. Of course. Yeah.
the system doesn't really is not really helpful these days, but
No, I mean, the thing is that it's also it's expensive to find super high quality ingredients to go into any product. So in your case, you need a really great crop. Same with me. I need a really great crop. I can't really take really, really bad material and make really, really great product from it. I can improve it, but there's only so much I can improve it. And also I'm trying to minimize the processing, as I know you are. And you can take shortcuts and reduce your costs by taking shortcuts in your processing, but I think it really does affect the quality of the product.
it does. Shortcut always do. So speaking of the original quality, reading your book, you believe like me that outdoor plant express much more than an indoor plant.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, the truth is that with indoor cultivation, you avoid what I call the bird poop problem, to borrow a line from my former partner, Mark Lewis. But At the same time, the sun is an autowatt light source, and the only one in our solar system. I haven't seen an autowatt LED rig yet,
I've seen it. You have to talk to those people. You would love them. He made the plasma in
oh
a
yeah,
ball.
yeah. You know, plasma sources, yeah. Now the problem with plasma sources is you got to be really careful around them because they can cause cataracts really fast. And yeah, so I don't want to have the world's greatest cannabis and walk with a white cane. I mean, I'm not into that. But the but the thing is what to me the compromise often is greenhouse cultivation.
Mm.
Now greenhouse comes with its own challenges, but some of my favorite cannabis currently being produced in California is being grown, you know, around Salinas in some of these greenhouses. My buddies at Molecular Farms, for example, I was just up there a couple weeks ago, and they had a 17-foot haze plant growing in their greenhouse, and it was just like, oh, it just made my heart go pity pat. And because I'm always out looking for the best, and honestly, a lot of the best right now is full sun cultivation. I mean, I'm not knocking indoor cultivation. I just think that for my needs, which is terpene expression, I get super terpene cannabis from greenhouses. And I used to, you know, work with a group that grew indoors, and we had a $3 million lab next to that cultivation. And when we got our greenhouse in Salinas, we took the same cultivar and grew it in the greenhouse and grew it indoors. And we saw a big jump in our terpene production. And the reason is you need energy to make these secondary metabolites in the plant, and you're never going to get a better source of energy than the sun, period.
Did you have a different terpene profile per se, or a stronger expression of the terpene profile?
Oh, well, I mean, this is something that really is one of the great questions of cannabis cultivation right now, which is what are the epigenetic and environmental factors that influence the production of terpenes and which terpenes in the plant. For example, when we used to grow ACDC, the high CBD strain, indoors, it was kind of a terrible plant indoors. I mean, it really was kind of bad. And the second we put it in the greenhouse, it started to produce ridiculous amounts of monoterpenes, in particular, myrcene. And it just went off the chain. And myrcene production seems to often really be driven by the sun. And the reason I know that is I sourced a crop for our first batch of Perfect. And one of the crops we sourced had almost 4.5% myrcene by weight, which is insanely high. I mean, yeah, insanely high. I mean, if you get 1%, you're doing good. 4%, you're off the chain. And my contention is that only happens currently under the sun.
Okay. I mean, I do believe this, and for me, because I work really with regenerative farmer in the Emerald Triangle, a lot of them grow the same strain. I really can see also a difference between places, like the microclimate of the place and the insect living specifically in a place are going to drive the plant to produce different terpene to deal with those living organisms and control them.
No question. Matter of fact, David Kennedy wrote a really good book called Plants and the Human Brain, and he talks about how plants evolved these compounds to control insect nervous systems. And so what happens is that the signaling mechanism network within the plant responds to these insect inputs and then responds by producing these chemicals. And the thing that's really fascinating to me is that we're in early days in understanding both the microbiome of the plant and how that microbiome in a particular place will influence productions of secondary metabolites, the insect life, as you say. I mean, these are very, very complex things to tear apart and understand in order to predict outcomes. But we'll get there. It's just going to take a while.
I mean, the plant kingdom has 200,000 compounds that it can process in those little glands. That's some serious alchemy.
Yeah, I mean,
To,
it's early days. I mean, people who say, "Oh, you know, science has helped us completely understand cannabis," you know, actually, I don't know if I've heard anybody say that, but if they did, I'd tell them they were full of crap. So,
uh, so speaking of this, you have one quote that I want to read to people. I want really to quote you on that one. Claiming that cannabis is completely safe and cause no harm is as irrational as claiming that cannabis has no medicinal use whatsoever. So there is something that you call biphasic effect. There is nothing that is too good. There is only two sides to everything. Could you explain
yeah.
to people a little bit?
As Paracelsus, one of the founders of modern medicine, said, "The dose makes the poison." Okay, and so the
Yes.
and so the thing is that cannabis is a very, very complex plant, and almost every compound that it produces does one thing at one dose and another thing at another dose, and you have to find the right balance for you. I really, really respect the approach to cannabis of finding your own minimum effective dose. And the thing is, back in high school or college, it was like people wore it as a badge of honor to take the largest dose they could of anything they could get their hand on, whether it was tequila or Colombian gold.
As you see.
And so, but as we learn more, we learn that there are a lot of subtle effects that are dependent in cannabis upon the dose that's ingested. And so what I like to do is I like to maintain a relatively low tolerance to cannabis compounds because it gives me more options. So I can take advantage of these biphasic effects, these effects at a low dose versus a medium dose versus a high dose, because it's actually triphasic for some things. And so, yeah, I think that, and I'm really, I treat cannabis as a potent drug. I don't think it's particularly unsafe, but I do respect its potency. And therefore, I'm really careful with certain compounds like limonene. I mean, inhaling limonene, they use limonene to degrease engines. Okay. All right. So, yeah, and so, inhaling some kind of vape cart that's been jacked in limonene just so it smells like orange juice is stupid. I mean, it's just plain stupid.
I was born in a perfume industry. I have a lot of respect. Perfume is the name of the game in south of France, and
Grass. I've been
aromatherapy.
to Grass. I've been to Grass and Provence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My grandparents had a house in Grasse. I remember visiting those big places. My grandparents were bringing flowers and stuff. And without having a strong knowledge of it, I respect strongly aromatherapy. And I know that terpenes are super toxic. You can kill people with
No.
terpenes.
I'll give you a great anecdote. So I was doing one of the early batches of our Perfect products, and I was working with these ultra concentrated high terpene extracts that we had made, and I'm in a relatively small room. I don't have a lot of ventilation, and I had no cannabinoids in my system at all. And all of a sudden, I realized I was really high. I mean, like float off the chair high. And I had to go outside and get about an hour of fresh air to metabolize off, in particular, myrcene that I was working with, because man alive, it was ultra psychoactive. And yeah, so respect perfuming compounds. I mean, I think we have so much to learn from the flavor and fragrance businesses. I mean, honestly, they're the smartest people in the world about compounds that are very important to cannabis.
I mean, when the BHO story started here, because I come from the perfume industry, I knew exactly the power of their tool. And I have a friend that works in terpene. He sells terpene by the gallon, big container. And I asked him to, one of his mentors is one of the third most amazing extractor in the world. So I wanted to know if, technically speaking, you could extract every compound and every terpene from a cannabis plant. And he was telling me that cannabinoid, most certainly, terpene, it all depends the quantities that is present in a plant. Some it's there is so little that you just don't even know how much there is of it. So even way less to extract it. But it gives me an idea of the power the BHO industry has. It's like if something really scares the big pharma, it's a kid without having to be even a chemist that can buy a $50,000, $60,000 machine and make pure isolate.
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah, or even more. I mean, one of the big French machines is the countercurrent chromatography rig that is used to separate out terpenes, and these are like $1 million machines. And it's funny that you mentioned this because one of the first things that I got into when I started Perfect was I was trying to do blends. The Perfect started because I wanted to do blends that I couldn't breed. So the plant is limited. For example, the plant normally doesn't produce terpinolene and limonene together. But when you mix them, wow, you get a really interesting effect. So I was doing these blends to create terpene entourages that I couldn't do in plant breeding. Well, the interesting thing was I was grinding the plant and I was taking it to SC Labs to have it tested. And the thing that I noticed was the second I touched the plant, I was losing my monoterpene content. And then I went and bought all of the high-end pre-rolls in the market right now, including the infused ones, and I tested them for monoterpene content. They didn't have any. Their processing basically had taken a steak and turned it into a hot dog. Okay, and what I've been trying to do with Perfect is restore what's lost in handling cannabis. These compounds, I mean, in France, they used entourage, this thing where you take fat and you lay the flowers on it, and the terpenes are attracted and absorbed into the fat, and then that's how you gather them. You know, here it's funny. You know, a lot of our extraction methods are actually turn out to be cruder than some of the earliest techniques in the perfume business, and I think there's a lot to learn from that.
I think the fat come from the Egyptian and Assyrian. It's as old as civilization, literally. Interesting. Entourage effect. We were talking with my friend alchemist, like Josh, about decarboxylation and stuff, and he mentioned, I didn't block him on it, but he mentioned that entourage effect is still a debate, that it's not really a proven fact. And I'm surprised because there is a lot of study by Ethan Russo for one that maybe do not prove that there is an entourage effect, but strongly suggests that the wholeness of the plant is very different than when you separate the compound.
Yeah, I mean, I think here's the scoop with entourages. Most of the studies that have been done to date, though there's a couple that are coming out shortly that look like pretty strong evidence to support it, because they were both they're what's called an in vitro and an in vivo study. So they were not only a study in a cell culture plate, but they were also a study on organisms. Anyway, the point is that most of the research that has disproved entourage effects, especially from terpenes, only looked at the CB1 and CB2 receptors. Well, that's dumb, because our understanding of the endocannabinoid system now shows that it's these other receptors, like the thermoreceptors, the TRP receptors, that are profoundly involved in how cannabis works. And so what I think you're going to see is these terpenes are going to be interacting with TRPV1 and some of these thermoreceptors, and that explains their effects. And so what it is the tent in which we're studying this is too small. We need a bigger tent. We need to study more receptors and more interactions with cannabis compounds, because that'll start to explain the effect. Because if you look at even at the effect of THC, there's stuff going on with THC that's not just mediated by the CB1 receptor. It's mediated by other receptors. Same with CBD. CBD works with 13 different receptors and ion channels that we know of. So it may be that these compounds are far beyond our ability to currently study them as far as their complexity of interactions. And that's okay with me, because the truth is, I don't need to know how wine works to know that wine works. I don't necessarily need to know the mechanism of action of every cannabis compound to know whether I like it or not, and whether or not it improves the experience I'm having when I ingest it.
So until now, I believe that the terpenoids were modulating the whole experience of the cannabinoid. But I thought that they were acting on CB1 and CB2.
No, it's probably not the case. It's probably not the case. And what's really fascinating too is there are some terpenes that are probably not doing much at all. In other words, the thing is, it's not every compound produced by a plant is going to be pharmacologically active in our nervous systems. Okay, and for example, osmine and terpinolene, I call them window pane terpenes, because what they do is they show the effects of the cannabinoids behind them. And in the case of myrcene, I think myrcene is a fast-acting compound that increases the impact of THC, but isn't necessarily the ultra sedative compound that Ethan thought it was.
Okay.
Now, linalool is super sedative. Matter of fact, just inhaling linalool from lavender oil will drop your blood pressure dramatically in seconds. And the thing is that so when I'm looking for sedative formulations to put in perfect products, I look beyond myrcene. I look to linalool and other compounds that seem to be much more effective in getting people to relax and go to sleep quickly.
I look at the CBN.
Yeah, CBN to me is a waste product. It's like it means people haven't taken care of the cannabis because you've got the oxidation.
It's not. I mean, for me, it's still a beautiful cannabinoid that I try to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, exactly.
Except
hilarious.
When people require it. So, for example, right. I have I'm being on decarboxylation for smoking. That's why I press with a hot bottle, and I'm still flabbergasted that our ancestors, the people who invented the hash game, could know that it was making their hash more potent.
Right.
Because they know that for a fact. They don't know why, but they know it makes stronger hash. The guy is going to tell you straight up. The science behind, they don't have. So for me, it's important to decarb at least 30-40% of my hash before smoking, where according to what I've read, you got another 20-25 at best. So then you pack almost 70% of decarb. That's the palier before you go down into the CBN. That I have what they call Indica or Sativa to work with. It doesn't really change much the experience of the hash.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, one of the things that's interesting is understanding the kind of physics and chemistry of smoking or vaporization. And so one of the things is that when you ignite something, you're going to have this forest fire effectively go through the product. And what's going to happen is out on the far edge, it's going to vaporize, but it's not necessarily going to completely decarboxylate. So when you decarboxylate, what happens is you're basically increasing bioavailability, even in an inhaled product. And when it comes to vaporization, I always recommend that people be extremely patient, because vaporizing cannabis is like smoking in extreme slow motion. And so what happens is it behaves effectively like a chromatography rig. You're getting the light volatile compounds off first, and then you're getting the heavier sesquiterpenes and cannabinoids next. And so you have to have a lot of patience to vaporize, because if you vaporize at a reasonable temperature, it's just going to take longer. You know, I mean, I love to use my Storz and Bickel Mighty with the little pad and your hash, because I just love how it just lasts and lasts and lasts and just has incredible flavor and effect.
You have to. I have to come and visit you with the hookah.
Oh no, I understand.
With that
You know,
incredible bowl they have, it's pretty
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, no, I've read a lot. The second you started talking about that particular head that you use, I went and researched it. I went and looked at the Porsche hookah. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you got $2,000 sitting around, it's a really cool looking hookah. But yeah, and it's funny because I think some of these technologies that have been around for a while have evolved, and I think some of the latest hookah technology may be some of the best ways to inhale cannabis. There's no question. So, yeah.
Now, when it comes to eating, I'm the opposite. I don't want to decarb too much. I want to decarb little because I don't want any CBN. I want, and I didn't know the science behind, but I always ate, since I'm 17 years old, ash and flowers that have not been decarb. Okay,
Right.
and I know it's not placebo, for sure. And lately, somebody told me that actually your stomach does a bunch of decarb, and since your liver on behind that even doesn't create the same THC, the 11 instead of 9, there is another bunch of magic happening there. Now I know also that there is endocannabinoid receptor in both the stomach and the liver. So basically, I'm trying to have as little decarb as possible so that I can eat a chunk of ash or a bong in the morning and be able to go around. Most edible, I've been decarb for hours and hours and hours before being cooked into an edible.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I love kind of raw edible preparations, or as close to raw as I can get. I mean, one of my favorite recipes is an old. It's funny. I read your white cookie post the other day, but I love mahoon. It's one of my favorite edible substances in the world. And what's cool is because a lot of the ingredients use other plant aromatics that are terpene rich. The best recipes I've ever made have really, really, really complex entourages, and I think some of those are getting into our bloodstream. So, yeah, I love this idea. Now, but one thing though, the decarboxylation in the stomach is really controversial. So there was a huge fight online between some of the most prominent cannabis scientists in the world, including Ethan Russo, who were saying that the claims that the stomach was doing decarboxylation were incorrect. And they later tested it. I'll send you the paper that shows that it may not be happening like they thought it was. And so the latest thing is, don't count on your stomach to do much decarb, but count on your liver to do all the heavy lifting when it comes to getting cannabinoids in your bloodstream.
Yeah, but those cannabinoids needs to cannot have the carboxyl acid group attached to them. Otherwise, there is no psychoactivity. So if you want psychoactivity, you need decarb.
No question. No question. I've always decarbed for my edibles. But the thing is that this stomach study that was done after this fight started in, I think it's in Cannabis and Cannabinoids. The papers are available on Google Scholar. So if you look up cannabinoid and gastric on Google Scholar, you'll find this argument. It was great. I mean, these guys really went at it. I mean, if they
Yeah.
were in a bar, they would have started throwing bottles
I
at
mean,
each other.
for me, it's a big deal because I know I definitely feel it. It's like around 4 in the afternoon, I'm always giggly, like I laugh like crazy for nothing. Like the first time I was smoking, it's like I know it act on me. I bless my stomach. Josh was saying that not everybody can process it. It depends the level of acidity in your stomach, actually.
And it may also depend on the microbiome in your digestive tract, because there are some pretty hardy microbes that live in your digestive tract, and who knows what they do, and nobody studied that yet. So the truth is that we really don't understand the effects of microbiome on cannabinoid metabolism. And so who knows if it's one of these like weird, like, Pylobacter bacteria that are actually doing that work. And the experiments with just stomach acids aren't showing the results. But if you actually used a real stomach, you might see something different. And that may explain the effects you're noting.
Okay, yeah, it's true. I've read something about it. Somebody who did it not on a person. Like they were studying the same gas acidity to see if it could work. But yeah, in the stomach, it's not quite the same.
I got a funny story from Rafi Meshulam. So I asked him. I was working with him in Washington D.C. and I heard this story about how he separated THC and CBD and how he makes all of his THC from CBD. So what he does is he gets this confiscated hashish from Lebanon, from the Israeli state police, and then he just cycles all the CBD to THC. Now, what's really interesting about that is all of these states that only allow CBD don't know that somebody with a high school chemistry class and a stovetop can convert all of their CBD into THC whenever they want.
I know. I wrote when I stopped writing article for everybody when I started my book, and the last article I wrote for Dolce Vita in Italy was an open letter about CBD and the growing hemp for CBD. And I was telling them, dude, you can transform CBD into THC, and it's not even something that you need to be a hardcore chemist and a lot of tools. I won't give you the link to to find it yourself, but it's like CBD is not the good boy. It's
No, it's a bad boy in a nice guy's outfit. Yeah. but I mean, the thing is, it's also, there's a really interesting study that came out of Australia, where they were blinding CBD or a placebo to a group of study participants, and then they had doctors behind glass trying to figure out which one of the people in the room were high from THC and which were high from CBD, and they couldn't really tell the difference. What they said is that objective measures, in other words, from observation of these people, it looked like the people who were taking CBD were actually getting high, which is not what I noticed, but what they noticed in the study, which I thought was really wild.
I in Europe, I had the chance to judge a competition in Italy, hemp hash. Okay, and the 4 best entry were not great, but I mean it's like concentrate, and I couldn't make enough difference to say to judge them. I had to smoke them. Early morning, I had not smoked, and I wasn't smoking too much during my trip in Italy. I smoked like four spliffs, maybe not to the end in a row. I had never felt. It's like a curtain of well-beingness that come down your body, and it's like, yeah, you're not high, but your body is in such a relaxed state that your head space change. I mean, it's all connected. It goes together.
yeah, Russo told me this thing, which I thought was really great, which is CBD is definitely psychoactive.
Uh-huh.
In other words, it changes how your brain works. It's just not the same kind of euphoria that we associate with THC. And so, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had tincture made from CBD isolate and taken a large dose of it, thinking that nothing was going to happen, and go to a meeting and then realize in the middle of the meeting, I'm a little high. So it's yeah, you gotta, it's there's something out there that we don't understand. I mean, that's the great thing. The reason I'm in this business is I've got so much left to learn, and I'm so excited about that. It's really cool.
There is no idea. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
beauty of it. Something that I'm very sensitive to, and actually wrote a paper about it. It's the big pharma trying to create synthetically cannabinoid. It's bad enough, but to try to use different compounds on the endocannabinoid system and literally killing people, because the endocannabinoid system really is very sensitive to anything but cannabinoid.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the endocannabinoid system, your body doesn't store endocannabinoids. It makes them when it needs them, and it makes them locally when it needs them. So there was this disaster in Europe when this Portuguese drug company called Bial decided to develop a drug that would interfere with how your body broke down its own endocannabinoids after it produced them. And so, what happened, it was these people had terrible brain damage because the drug was working everywhere. And the thing is that the drawback to using synthetic potent cannabinoids that literally work systemically is that you can really hurt people. And I'm really suspicious of any systemic synthetic cannabinoid research, especially things that interfere with the enzymatic breakdown of these products to try to get your own cannabinoids to work longer. I think they're super dangerous. And actually, that Dial incident and the subsequent lawsuits got a lot of big pharma companies to exit cannabinoid research because they were so scared of the potential lawsuits. And so, yeah, I see that stuff with a lot of suspicion.
The French company, I think with some Portuguese actually, something to lose weight. They
that was
they
Ramonabon.
brain damage half a dozen people on their first live trial on people or something like that.
Yeah, what happened was it's a drug called Ramonabon, and what it is it works like THCV. And what it does is it antagonizes the CB1 receptors. But the problem is your CB1 receptors help regulate emotion. And so what happened was when they took Ramonabon, it reduced their appetite, but it also made them suicidal. And that was the problem. And it's one of the reasons, like you'll hear people go, oh, THCV, it's so cool. Well, I've smoked THCV hash. And let me tell you, I don't find it cool at all. It gives me a headache. I just don't like the effect of THCV. I mean, it's just like not my cannabinoid. It may be great for some people, not for me.
Let's get to varietal also. Our varietal are pretty much where we should find the plant that really is comment dire, taking care of the need we have on you. And before we go there, I'd like also to stop talking about Indica and Sativa. It's pretty. We are so beyond that. While I don't like really thin leaf drug and narrow leaf drug and broadleaf drug because of the word drug, it really definitely defines really well the difference and the diversity that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I think the big thing with sativa and indica and also with broadleaf drug, narrowleaf drug, et cetera, is kind of trying to figure out the taste of a nut by the shape of the tree.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense at all. All right, so what I look at is I look at what are called terpene superclasses. So terpene superclasses, that there are certain terpene synthase genes in the plant that govern what terpenes are produced and how much of them. That's much more informative to me. There are 8 basic terpene superclasses, and they definitely have effects associated with them. And so going forward, I think these terpene superclasses are a much better way for consumers to find the cannabis that they like. I'll give you some examples. So you've got a myrcene pinene or pinene myrcene variety, like Blue Dream. Okay. Well, the pinene myrcene varieties are all going to work a little bit like Blue Dream. They're going to have a mildly stimulating, very clear effect where the pinene protects the hippocampus from THC memory effects. And so what you get is a clear functional high where you can find your keys. Okay. While a Bubba Kush, while it may not be particularly high in THCA, it is high in linalool. Therefore, it's a very, very relaxing high, and it produces limonene. And what limonene does is it's a fantastic mood elevator.
Yeah.
So you get mild sedation and mood elevation. And to me, that says I want to curl up with my partner and take a nap.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Does
So
the
sorry, I have a
terpene
call something there. So
does the terpene profile change really the experience?
dramatically. And I mean, I've really now tested it a lot. I mean,
Doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah.
Doesn't matter the amount of cannabinoid?
To some degree, yeah, because what it's doing is it's modulating the cannabinoid effect. I mean, I've done this both with high terpene hemp and high terpene THC cannabis. I mean, what's really wild is to sit down and roll a spliff of fresh high terpene hemp cannabis and smoke it, and you get really high. I mean, I did this up in Salinas a couple of months ago, and so what's fascinating is that as long as the terpene entourage is intact, which is really hard to do once you dry the cannabis and once you store the cannabis, but if it's there, it really changes the outcome. And that's what we've shown with the Perfect products. I just got our first compliance samples back from SC Labs, and our terpene content averages about 3.5%, which is really high in a finished product, and equivalent to like a Emerald Cup winner. And what you get is when you smoke that, I mean, it dramatically changes how the THC feels. And I got to get you some. I got to get you some to try because I'd love your feedback.
So that whole story, I need as much THC in percentage as possible to feel high. It's
Nonsense. It's
it's so
nonsense.
beyond reality that is.
No, it's not real. And what's fascinating too is that distillates have one note highs. In other words, I call cannabis distillates. They're like bass solos on a rock and roll record. They're not that interesting. And so in the case of, you want a rich, intact entourage. I mean, the thing I loved about your Jungle Hash when it was first released was it had that terrific spicy entourage, and the psychoactivity was noteworthy. It was really cool. Good old Swami. That was Swami, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think these rich entourages are definitely responsible for a considerable amount of psychoactivity, and most people have never experienced it because when they buy these dried flowers in the stores, they've lost an enormous amount of their entourage already, just in the fact that often they've been stored for so long, not at temperature. You got to keep stuff cold. It's really important. If you don't, you lose
So
the
at what temperature are you losing those monoterpenes?
Well, I mean, I recommend keeping, like when I used to own a dispensary, I bought a big wine refrigerator, and I bought a lab refrigerator, but I set it to wine cooler temperatures, and I kept everything to about 48 degrees. That was good for short-term storage. For long-term storage now, I keep everything in what's called a low temperature freezer, which is minus 51 degrees. And I can keep stuff for years and keep it the same.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, what you're trying to do is temperature just keeps molecules from moving. It's just the way it works. And so what I want to do is I want to slow down the molecules. I don't want them to leave the plant. So.
For me, that fine line. I need a temperature that let whatever is happening in that resin happen. But at the same time, I don't want a too high temperature that I decarb too much.
Well, you have an advantage, though. You have an advantage. And the reason you have an advantage is you're taking a huge range of plant compounds out when you sift the trichomes out and then work just with the trichome mass. Because you have all these fats and waxes, and some of those they're what the plant uses to keep these compounds around. Therefore, it makes sense that you have a little bit more latitude than if somebody doesn't have the trichomes together in a mass.
Mm-hmm.
When you have them spread out over the flower, they're a lot more delicate and they're mildly permeable, which means stuff can get out of them, which is why you can smell the terpenes. You know, The truth is if trichomes were perfect vehicles to keep terpenes in, you wouldn't smell the terpenes. But because you do, it indicates they're permeable.
You don't at night?
No, you certainly less. I mean, if you walk around a garden at night, you definitely don't.
I mean, there is time of the night, like somewhere around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to first light, where they shut down. They don't use it.
Right, because the plant doesn't have the energy for those secretory cells to work. And what it's doing is it's constantly refreshing the inside of there's a couple of great papers published in the last 18 months about how trichomes work. And it's fascinating. I mean, and so, it's a little factory that's making these compounds and constantly knocking them out. And the volatile ones leave the plant because they're being used to either attract or repel insects. And so the plant has to constantly refresh them. And it's really interesting stuff, actually.
Do you harvest at night to maximize your terpene harvest?
Actually, what you'd probably want to do is test during the daylight hours and find, because remember the plant is making stuff all day long.
Also,
so the question is what point of the day is optimal for harvest? It may be late in the day when those cells have been kicking it out all day, but then that again depends on the temperature and how fast things are moving through the cuticular wax on the outside of the trichome.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of variables, but again, lots to learn. I mean, that's what's cool.
No, I've been telling my farmer to do that, like in the wine industry. For the greatest wine, they harvest the grape at night.
Right. Yeah.
It's you retain more inside.
You're making me want to have a glass of Pinot.
No, that's one of the good thing living here. It's you have now the wine industry and the cannabis industry that is starting to appreciate each other because they need to deal with each other. So when you have Napa that is known for the wine, but Sonoma is not known and they would like the wine connoisseur to come, if there is cannabis and special regional product like you have in Europe, then you become a destination. Like together we're stronger than by yourself. It started to...
Completely agree. Matter of fact, and also, I mean, I hope someday we have a California university that's as sophisticated in cannabis as Davis is in wine. Because, I mean, UC Davis, I mean, their wine sciences program is crazy good. From cultivation to production, they know everything. And the thing is that we don't really have a university in the world right now that provides that kind of education.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's one of the reasons I wrote a book. I mean, even though my book is a mass market book rather than an academic book, it's being used in a lot of the first courses. But I need to make it better because I think it needs to be even better for that. So
it's cool because your book, there is a lot of depth, but it's you can, anybody can read it and got a good picture of the overall what it represents.
Well, you
Then
know,
it's
my
you
model,
indeed,
yeah, my
because
model was,
there
yeah,
is so many facets of it also. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah,
I wanted to talk medicine with you, how the cannabinoids use together reinforce each other. But we have 5 minutes. Can you do 3 minutes actually?
3 minutes, yeah, sure. I mean, basically, the idea is that these complex entourages work throughout the body and interact with an enormous number of receptor systems that become deranged when people are ill. So what it is, I mean, it's really fascinating. Certain cannabis medicinal effects, like THCA doesn't work as a medicine in, at least this is what Ethan Russo thinks, and I agree with him, that THCA may work only when somebody has a damaged nervous system, because then it can get across the blood-brain barrier when that blood-brain barrier is disturbed. And I think there's an enormous amount of research to be done on medicinal effects from every single compound the plant produces, whether it's decarboxylated or not. I think there's a long way to go. So maybe that's the next, our next hour-long talk will be about that.
Yeah, definitely. Now that people understand the difference, the plant is pure medicine. Everything comes with that A. As long as there is that A, it's not psychoactive. And there is everything in between.
But also, I think that there's nothing wrong with happiness being a medicine. Therefore, it doesn't have to have an A to provide happiness. And so the thing is that I think that we often underestimate the medicinal value of THC. I think that it's got the bad boy reputation. It doesn't deserve it. Why shouldn't we be happy, especially right now? So.
No, and it's like before I knew it was a medicine, I was treating me, and it's no, when I realized that it was a medicine, I realized that yeah, actually I was taking care of myself.
I
My
think
Madame Cannoli is telling me we are done.
so. The last line is from Dennis Perot, who said all cannabis use is medicinal, and I agree with Dennis. He
Yeah,
was right.
yeah, it is so right. And we,
Thanks so much for having me on,
man,
Francis.
it's
It's
such a
great.
pleasure.
It was
It
really
was
great.
nice. Okay. That's what I like this. We have sometimes to talk together. We have to make it again.
Yeah,
Thank
I'd
you
love to.
so much.
You're welcome. Thanks so much. Take care, pal.
You have a good one.
You too, pal. Bye.